Hi, I'm Shiloh Thomas from Arcterra. Welcome to Surveillance Signals, where we look at how global financial institutions are navigating change in communications surveillance. I recently sat down with Chris Stapenhurst, a product strategist for surveillance at Arcterra, to talk about how differing supervisory expectations are reshaping how global programs actually operate. Hi, Chris. Welcome. It's great to have you.
Hi, Shiloh. Good to see you.
So, Chris, let's begin with surveillance programs themselves. Surveillance programs, they tend to mandate different communication processes in different ways. In practice, how do those differences show up in day-to-day activities?
When it comes to communication surveillance, when we look at sort of the customers we've got across the globe, we do see some stark differences, right? In North America, it tends to be focused on both wholesale and retail markets. They tend to be focused not just on market abuse, but a lot of focus on customer complaints and that sort of thing. When you look at Europe, there tends to be more of a focus due to MiFID II on not only just chat and email, but also on voice communications, transcription, translation tends to become increasingly important when you leave the North American soil. In Asia, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I can say that when you look at Australia, it probably more closely resembles the regimes that you see in both the US and in Canada. Whereas you've got other jurisdictions that might do things a little bit differently. Singapore, Japan, Korea come to mind. But you've also got countries like Malaysia where the framework is continuously evolving, and we're looking to see more and more countries adopt a more rigid framework around their needs to be able to conduct communication surveillance.
So, for those firms that do operate across multiple jurisdictions, as you just described, how does that change the way that they're structured or that they run their surveillance programs?
Well, there's no one size fits all. As you know, within this industry, every firm is unique, and we hear that from pretty much all of our customers, and I think that's a fair statement. But generally, there's two significant camps that we see. We've got some clients that kind of do the all-in-one approach, where they set up a data center, either their own or they purchase from us as a service, and they leverage everything through that data center, regardless of where the actual monitored employees happen to be globally. We've got other clients that kind of go with a mixed bag approach where they might have different data centers in different regions to serve their monitored employee populations. And in some cases, they might use an on-prem product in one region where they're deploying it and managing the hardware themselves. And in another region, they might use us as a service as well. And so there's no, again, one size fits all. What's really important as a vendor in this space, when we're looking at the fragmented regime across the different regulators, around the different privacy regulations that exist across the world, is to provide you with options. You might be set up in a particular way today, but who's to know that it's going to continue that way down the road, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? When you're purchasing an archive and surveillance-based solution, it's ideally something that you're going to want to stick around with for 5, 10 years plus. And so having that capability to deploy where you need it is actually really important.
Chris, when you talked about the different regimes and how those are different within different regions, does that change how an organization needs to structure or run their surveillance workflows?
So what we have seen is in some regions, like in EMEA specifically, due to MiFID II, there's been a rise in sort of consolidation of both VCOMs, so voice communication surveillance, and ECOMs, electronic communication surveillance. And so traditionally, what we've seen those firms do is they'll have two different solutions, and on occasion, potentially even two different teams doing that communication monitoring with different sets of alerts. Because now the technology and the AI has gotten so really good when it comes to transcription, we're able to consolidate both ecoms and vcoms with a single solution. And we've seen a collapse of those teams into a single team that handle both electronic communication surveillance and voice communication surveillance.
So that definitely offers some simplicity in their surveillance workflows. What do firms tend to struggle most with, though, when they're trying to maintain the consistency of their surveillance programs? And let's think about that. How do they do it at scale?
Well, so the biggest challenge has always been and continues to be false positives, right? Firms need to mature in their adoption of a multitude of different technologies, including AI, to be able to move from a paradigm where you have a surveillance team triaging hundreds or thousands of alerts every day to look for potential violation towards a firm that's more focused on investigations and being given high quality alerts that they could spend more time on each alert. At the end of the day, as you transition from that former regime to the latter one, you get not only the capability to have a better utilization by your highly trained surveillance teams and their skill sets, but you're also tend to incur more findings, right? More alerts don't necessarily mean more findings. What we've seen is that fewer high quality alerts tend to generate more findings overall. And firms need to start migrating towards that approach because if they're not doing it today, they're going to be left behind.
And so when I hear all these different alerts and how to manage the different conversations to be able to find that one item that needs to be reviewed, I can imagine that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So, what parts have you seen, parts of surveillance, have you seen our customers tend to be more manual, um, duplicated, complex as a result? Is it trying to cut through that noise?
I think it's just sort of maturing in terms of their learning mechanisms. In the past, everything was sort of based on um, random sampling, right? And we still have a few firms now that are reliant on random sampling as their primary alert mechanism. Most firms, I will admit, have moved away from relying so heavily on random sampling, but we still have some. So let's call that phase one, right? And as firms mature, they go from primarily random sampling to typically leveraging lexicons, going from lexicons to leveraging classification policies, right? As a vendor, we provide our customers with the capability to not only identify potential alerts within communication, but also to identify noise. And so you can create the kinds of logic that say, give me alerts relating to insider trading and gifts and entertainment, but remove the noise from them. You want to leverage that. And then the next generation beyond that is AI. And so you want to be leveraging machine learning and language models. And so we offer that too. And so typically, as I see firms mature, they tend to kind of follow that path, right? Random sampling first, lexicon based search second, classification logic to include and exclude both noise and alerts, and then leveraging all of that working in concert with language models and machine learning. And once you kind of get to that phase, then you're at a phase where you're much more mature as an organization when it comes to your surveillance program.
When you look back across the years of how surveillance programs have been run, what assumptions about running a global surveillance program, knowing the change in regulatory requirements, what no longer holds true? What has changed? And what do customers need to be mindful of moving forward?
This is a conservative industry. We're talking about finance here. We're talking about the financial industry. Um, what needs to change is a resistance to change. Organizations need to embrace the fact that technology is moving really quickly, and we don't want them to move recklessly. Everything needs to be done with good governance, with good compliance oversight. That continues to be sort of the minimum viable that needs to occur for all of our customers. But our customers need to be able to adopt new technology, need to be able to adopt new techniques at a rate that is increasingly getting faster and faster. And so, if you're not exercising those muscles as an organization to try to adopt new techniques, to try to adopt new technology, you're getting further and further left behind. And so one thing that I would recommend that customers need to change is the speed at which they're willing to adjust and adopt both technology and process to their surveillance programs.
So, Chris, we know that as you're working with the regulators and they're making these changes, it's not entirely a one-way street. There is opportunity to collaborate with these regulators, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think collaboration is kind of a key theme across the industry, right? I attend a lot of conferences. I speak to dozens of customers on a monthly basis, all the time. And the firms that are succeeding, the firms that are kind of leading the pack in terms of success when it comes to surveillance, are those that have embraced the concept of collaboration. You want to collaborate with the regulators themselves, right? Understanding what they're looking for, what sweeps they might be incurring, what areas they want to focus on. The more you understand that, the better you can prepare your firm. I attend other conferences, and there's a lot of discussions around aligning the three lines of defense and having them collaborate together. How often is the first line and the second line collaborating on how to identify risk and mitigate risk? How often is the third line involved in those conversations? The more you can bring those three themes together, the better you can holistically address risk. And then lastly, one of the things that I like to preach a lot, being a technologist in this industry, is the need or the requirement or the benefit for firms to actually collaborate with their technology vendors. I can't tell you how many times I appear on site or virtually on site, discussing with customers who are trying to solve a problems and troubleshooting with them, only to discover that the problem that they have can be solved with the existing technology they're using today. And it's just that maybe IT didn't turn on a switch or make that feature available to them. Or maybe they did misinterpreted the documentation and they're not taking advantage of a feature that can solve an existing problem today. And so I think a lot of problems can also be solved through better collaboration with the vendor. And so the more we all collaborate together, the three lines, the regulators, the vendors with your firm, the better position you're going to be when it comes to sort of reducing your risk profile in the industry and bettering what we see with a lot of firms out there trying to solve this problem.
As supervision expectations continue to differ across regions, global firms are being forced to rethink how their programs actually operate day to day. Thanks for watching Surveillance Signals. You can find more perspectives on communication surveillance at arcterra.com.